Hello everyone, this is Olmzarascalm. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of the Quilt as you go. Welcome back everyone. So you came back to part 3 of the Quilt as you go, where in part 3 we're going to add some more length and width to this quilt, doing the quilt as you go. Also, we're going to add a border. Now, I have named this quilt Peace in the Midst of the Pandemic, and I went through a lot of ups and downs during this quilt, so I don't want to bog you down with the details of everything. Just know, if you see any imperfections in this quilt, just know this quilt, as I made it, emotions came out, and this is how it came out to be. So, peace in the midst of the pandemic. This is how the back of our quilt is looking. As you can see, I have already added my 5 extra inches and my ruffles here. Let's see how I did this. So I decided to add 5 more inches to my quilt. In here I have a 1.5 inch brown inner border, and then I have this 1 inch polka dot, and then I have the blue turquoise here. And I'm gonna sew these into a panel. You can see here how I've already put it in the quilt. So let's see how I did that. So I went on and sewed this together, and it measures, once I sew it together and iron it out, it measures about 5 inches in width. Again, I have a 1 inch border, inner border, 1.5 inch inner border. And then I have the polka dotted accent piece, and I think this is 4.5. So if that's 4.5 and then 1.5, that makes that 6 inches. So I'm adding 6 inches to this quilt right here. And I'm holding my camera right now, you guys, and I'm trying to get a shot for you. The things that creators do to get a shot here. And I'm just giving you some pictures, heads up pictures, to show you that it is possible to increase the size of your quilt doing the quilt as you go method. So what do we do when we want to do the quilt as you go method? The first thing we did was to get our blocks together and to quilt them. We found some quilting designs, and that's the same thing I'm doing here. Instead of blocks, I have long strips that will measure out to the top and the bottom of my quilt. And I have decided to put feathers here. So I made a long quilt sandwich, which consists of your back of your quilt, your back, and then your batting, and then the top of your quilt. And I have stitched in the ditch along the straight parts, and now I'm putting in the veins of my feathers with my walking foot. And this will have a double vein in it. So this is how the back of this long strip is looking. And it is flannel. So now I can turn it over, and I can go ahead and put in my feathers using my free motion foot. And it's just like we made a quilt sandwich, how you made a quilt sandwich in part 1 when we made our quilt sandwich. You're just going to make a long quilt sandwich, and it's a really good thing to make your quilt sandwich wide enough for you to handle this piece. So that's why I have 2 of them together. Now once I finish that, I'm just going to admire my feathers that I've the quilting design that I decided to choose to put in there, and admire how my feathers are looking. And I'm glad because I made enough room for all my feathers to show. So we have quilted our blocks, right? We have quilted this area, and now the next thing to do is to cut these apart and to square them up. So I'm just going to cut these apart and get ready to have them attach them to the quilt. Now you do want to use a rotary cutter. I'm just cutting these apart with scissors for right now, but I will get my rotary cutter and cut this down. Make sure that we have a straight edge. I always want to make sure you have a straight edge. And again, this measures about, I would say, 6 inches wide. It could be 6.5. I don't know, I forgot the measurements. But my video is just to give you an idea of what you can do. Not so much measurement by measurement. So I have my top border, bottom border here, and let's get a close-up of it. You can see on the back of the quilt, you'll see my 1-inch sashing strip, and on the front of the quilt you will see the 2-inch sashing strip. And I have already put these on the quilt instead of on the I've attached them to the quilt instead of the sashing. And either way that you do it, it doesn't matter, just long as you have your sashing slips ready to and attach them to either the sashing or the quilt. So let's get a close-up here. That's this top border that I want to put on. Here is my 2-inch sashing strip here. Let's turn it over, and sorry about that. There's my 1-inch sashing strip. So we are ready to go to get this top and bottom border added to our quilt. And what do? We always start with a 1-inch strip, and we're going to attach that 1-inch strip with the right side facing the back of the sashing strip that is already quilted. Isn't that convenient? You don't have to sit and quilt this whole quilt. Not even, you can quilt sections of it, section by section, and add it up and build it into a quilt. So that's what I'm going to do. You will not see it in the video. I'm hoping that you will go back to part 2 and watch how I attach two blocks together. That's all we're going to do, the same thing. How I attach 2 blocks is how you're going to attach your strip to your top and your bottom border to your quilt. But here is the result after I have attached the top and side borders. I like it. It's looking good. I have already added 6 inches to one side. That's 12 inches to the quilt total. Now I wanted to make rounded corners. I went in my kitchen and took a bowl, took an ink pen, and just put a curve around the corner. Now I want to show you my side borders with a polka dotted accent. It is on there. It's looking good. My feathers are standing out, looking great. I made my quilt bigger. That's what I wanted to do. and I'm happy about it. Everything is checking out. There's my brown polka dotted border there, and we are off and running. This is how it's looking. We have 6 and 6 on each side. That's 12 inches we've added to this quilt. Now when I put it on my bed, it hangs down better. So now you can also add more to the top and the bottom of the quilt if you so choose to, and maybe add just a little to the sides. It all depends on how much you need. If you want your quilt to hang a little, you will do that. So the next thing I did was get on top of the ruffles. This is a double ruffle. So my light blue fabric is shorter than the dark blue fabric. When I fold it in half, I get this 1/2 of an inch at the bottom here. This is called a double ruffle. There's so many YouTube videos on where you guys can learn how to do that. I took the circumference measure of my quilt and I added a 1/2 of that. I found something online that told me how to add the measurements for adding a relaxed ruffle, and I did that, and I had so much fabric left over. So I'm gonna say you want to check out how much ruffle you need if you're using a ruffler. So don't go by my measurements, just go online and look to see. I know you're gonna measure the circumference of your quilt, and then it all depends on the fullness of the ruffle. So I wanted a relaxed ruffle, so I just went on and added, I think, 1/2 of the measurement, 1.5 of my measurement. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. So I don't really remember, you guys. Hopefully this will give you an idea to figure out what it is how much ruffle you do want. But what I'm doing here is very, very it is dangerous right now. Now, can you imagine you have a whole quilt, and I'm pinning these pins in a whole quilt. Which direction is the pins? Are the pins turning toward me? And it doesn't matter if you pin upward or downward, if you pin sideways. When you're doing your binding on a quilt, that quilt is sitting in your lap and maybe on the floor. You're gonna get stuck with these pins, and that was what I did. When I look at it, I feel so many different emotions, and I didn't have to go through that because I have wonder clips. Why? And I look at this video, why didn't I use my wonder clips? Use your wonder clips, guys. So I'm pinning my ruffles around and my binding, and I'm going to take this to the machine. What you see here, these were my practice blocks, and I've decided to make a table runner to put on the dresser that would match the quilt that I made. So you're seeing me do a small portion again. I don't have camera room for you guys to see me sew on a binding of a quilt, so I always have to do a little sampler here so you guys can see. And I am just really pinning this along, and I'm just thinking, you really have wonder clips, and you really are not gonna use wonder. I got stuck so many times, you guys. So nobody can say that I'm full of hot air. Ha ha ha, ba-dum-bum. That was a good joke right there. So I'm just really determined to pin this. Wow, you are going to suffer I mean, it's cool if you have this small little table runner, you're cool to do that. But oh my goodness, 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 goodness. Boy, did I get stuck when I did this on the whole quilt to do the binding around the quilt. I was miserable. So I think that I think this might be the actual, no, this is the sample. But I am holding my camera. I have pins in this little section, and I'm holding the camera. This is like drinking and driving and being intoxicated, because you can drink and drive but you're not intoxicated, right? So this is drinking, driving, and being intoxicated and on the influence of drugs, okay? When you sew and try to videotape with pins, so guys, don't do this. It's dangerous. Call the quilting police right now. So when you sew on your ruffle and your binding all at the same time, it's going to look like this. It's good to sew them on at the same time, because we're talking about a whole queen size quilt here. You don't want to sew on your ruffle and come back around. I mean, if you have the ability to do that and the time, you can go for it, but I try to do it all in one time. So once you put your ruffle and your binding on, you're gonna go ahead and you can iron this out and press it out. If you have a lot of bulk, you can trim that down also. I took advantage of my bulkiness because I thought that if I turned it under along with the bulkiness, it would remind me of piping. And I said, oh, this looks like some piping here, so I kept it. And because the binding is doubled, it will hold up through time, you know. On some parts of it, it does look like piping there. So this is how the ruffle is looking, and this is the up close of how it's looking. You can see how it looks like somewhat like piping. Here, let me move up the camera. There you go. This is how the back of it is looking. I'm liking how it's looking, nice and neat. My ruffles are looking wonderful. I even like how my feathers are hidden under the sashing. It just looks so nice. You know, sometimes you think of your mistakes, that they're mistakes, but they may not be mistakes to other people. Or if you look at it in an artful eye, you might think that's pretty doggone smart the way you did that. So this is how it's looking, guys. We have ruffles on. We have added, what is it, 6 inches on one side, 6 on. We added 12 inches to our quilt, and with ruffles included. We've added a faux piping, and the ruffles made the quilt look so feminine and elegant, and I loved the way it turned out. So I named the quilt Peace in the Midst of the Pandemic. I took my quilt down to the lake out here in California, and I cried and I laughed and I prayed for you and I prayed for me, and I don't know where all the time went, and I had to take care of my mental health, and I stayed out here for so long. It was so wonderful. So get away from your sewing area and your sewing room and go out into nature and take care of your mental health, and pray for me. Pray for this world. Excuse me. So that's it, guys. Peace in the midst of the pandemic. This is part 3 of the Quilt As You Go. I want to thank you for coming along on this journey of the Quilt As You Go. And I hope you decide to add ruffles and binding and increase your quilt. And I want to say thank you for watching my video. There's so many videos you can watch on YouTube, and you decided to come along with me on this 3-part journey, and I do appreciate it. And I'm hoping that everyone is well and strong and making it through this difficult time that we are in. And just know that you have someone over here on this side of the world or the town that is thinking about you and praying for you. So peace in the midst of the pandemic. By the way, this quilt has so many bumps and tings and different things along with it. I decided to keep it because this quilt will remind me of a time that we were in. And it's not perfect, but it's just right, you know. So thank you for coming along with me, guys. Have you made a pandemic quilt? Are you going through things in your mental health area? I usually, when I'm going through things, I usually get more involved in my creativity and my sewing and crafting. So I have something to look back on it and know that I made it through. So this was a fun quilt as you go, guys. It's nice to see something beautiful come out of something so tragic. Peace in the midst of the pandemic. This is how the back of the quilt is looking. I love the sashing strips that I picked out. Next time when I make a quilt, I want to put something on the back more better than that. So this is Olmzarascalm. I'm going to say bye-bye for now. And thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.